Hi, everybody. Great to be here. I'm going to get one thing out of the way right away. I am not going to rap. But I am here to talk to you about this new audio-first world that we live in. I'm going to talk about what that actually means, and especially from a marketing perspective, why you should care. So let's get right into it. What I want for you guys to take away is a couple of useful tips, hopefully, a couple of insights of how my company and I think about this audio-first world, and perhaps inspire you to think about opportunities to kind of think about marketing and a couple of other things differently. So there's two really big trends happening right now. This one trend is actually not new, and it's called content atomization. And what that means is content over time tends to get shorter. And we've seen this with written text. We've gone from books to blogs to tweets. And in video, we've gone from movies to series to TikTok. Audiences today are time-strapped, they are screen-tired, they're overloaded, and they basically expect to get content like very instantly and engage with that very instantly. The second trend is actually it is COVID. Can't kind of deny it. They triggered this amazing digital transformation. I mean, companies were talking about it for years, right? It's like, we're going to do this digitization, and then that took years and years and years, and then finally last year, all of us got basically pushed off this proverbial ledge, and we had to do it. What happened with that is that there was an explosion of audio and video content. Even events like this today is getting recorded and used afterwards. So all of our events, thought leadership, professional conversations, not to mention all the personal conversations, all went digital. They went online, and they're primarily audio. And what we talk about, the spoken internet, is what we mean. So the amount of audio-video content that's out there is getting very big, and it's basically catching up with the written text that exists on the web. So the problem with this content is that it's extremely hard to engage with. It's essentially a black box. So I'm going to give you an analogy. So here's a bookstore. There's a person, enjoying a book, reading it, seemingly the table of contents. Now imagine that every single book in that bookstore was wrapped in plastic. You couldn't open the book. So you could only kind of hold it in your hands. You could see the front cover. You'd see the name of the author. You'd see the title. And if you turned it around, maybe you'd see a couple of the nice things that reviewers said about the book. But you can't open it, you can't see the table of contents, you can't browse to the chapter that really is interesting to you, and you can't read an interesting bit out to a friend. It's crazy, right? But that's how audio and video gets produced today. And that is a new challenge for marketers, which is what we call the content packaging problem. So audio and video is essentially very linear. You can't search, you can't see inside. I mean, how many times have you gotten a webinar recording? You signed up for a webinar, you couldn't actually attend it when it aired, and then you get the recording, and you open it up, and it's 1 hour, and there's a black box and the play button in the middle of it. And you're like, I don't have the time. Like, give me the 5 minutes that really interest me. This is linear, right? But people aren't linear. Like, they need to be hooked, like the first couple of seconds. So that's the challenge that we have. And what we call this challenge is called TLDL. So you've probably heard of TLDR, too long didn't read. So now we have too long didn't listen. So people's attention spans have basically just completely plummeted to nothing. I mean, all of us, well, most of us are sitting in front of Zoom 8 hours a day. We're kind of pretty exhausted from that, and we don't really have the patience or the time. And it's actually not really fair to us to have this overload of content without really getting what's really important to us. So what it means that this content has to be time-saving, it has to be relevant, it has to reach the right channels. And there's tons of content like that. So you think audio content, does that really affect me? Is that really part of my life? If you work somewhere, it absolutely is, because you're creating it every day. So we're talking about conferences like this, we're talking about webinars, we're talking about sales presentations, product introductions, fireside chat, and this is all material for really great marketing assets. The problem with it is it's actually really long form, and you need to be using it in much different, shorter formats. So the question becomes, how do you get that insights, those nuggets out to share and you put in front of people? Even if you had a CEO who's did a voice memo, even that could be a great marketing asset. So what if I told you that we could take all this content and you could turn it into marketable assets pretty much instantaneously? And that's the reason we built Snackable. So I want to basically give you 3 very simple steps on how you take something like a recording from a session like this or anything that you've done in your professional life, and you turn into something that you can really engagingly market out to other people. So the first thing you want is that you want to take all the content that exists, on your drives, on people's laptops, in the Zoom cloud, and you want to put it into one searchable repository. And the search part is really key, because back to the book analogy, most of the time what we can search is the titles of things, of audio, video, but even that is not often very much, because people don't spend that much time. So what you want is actually to be able to see inside of it. You want to see where are those nuggets, who said what where, to be able to the way you do internet search, to be able to do audio search the same way. And the challenge is a lot of the drives, the Dropboxes, the Boxes, the Google Drives, they're not actually audio video native, and Snackable is. So now that you have all your content in one place, you want to actually choose the best parts from the content. And it's actually really absurd how manual that process is today and time-consuming. What happens is that you have this great recording, and you're like, OK, now I'm going to find the part that I really care about. And that means you keep listening through and through and through 3, 4 times, and you're making timestamps, you're taking notes. It's really inefficient. So you can put machines to the task, which is what we've done. So we basically built this AI company to skim through every bit of your recordings and really tell you what's where. So I'm going to explain this maybe in a little bit more detail. So if you look at this, it's a little bit light, but anyway, it's basically a visualization of a recording. So what our machine does is a couple of different things. It kind of breaks the content down into these logical chapters. An hour's worth of recording is actually 20 pages of text when you transcribe it. Most people don't know how massive audio really is. And it is. So it's actually, if you wrote a 20-page paper, you would never put it out without putting chapter markers in it. So we do that with AI. You maybe have seen, actually, people on YouTube do this manually. So if you have seen a YouTube video where you have the playback bar, and you kind of scan it, and you see the chapters pop up, and they have titles on them, and you're like, on minute 40, they talked about chapter 5, they talked about this one thing I care about. Super efficient, right, to just commit 5 minutes as opposed to a whole hour. We do that with AI automatically, and it works really well. The other thing we do is that we go back in and we find this kind of really juicy, information-dense, 30 to 60-second bits. They're called the highlight clips. We actually call them snacks, hence the name of the company. And we pull those out so that you can actually use those bits for any sort of marketing with your, or even communications with your internal stakeholders, with your prospective customers, for social media. So the final step that you want is that you found the right file, now you found the right juicy bit that is good for sharing, and you now want to actually package it into something that is shareable on the interwebs. And this is where we have a suite of tools. So the snacks we package into something called audiograms, and I'm going to show you an example in a minute. The chapter-wise webinars, which we just talked about, are really great to drive search engine optimization. So one key thing is that if you had, let's say you had a webinar, you put it through Snackable, you published it to YouTube with those chapters, is that Google Video Search now indexes every one of those chapters separately, so you get a huge boost in search results. Not to mention the efficiencies you're creating for users in terms of browsing. And the third one is transcripts. And transcripts are really key for 2 reasons. The main one is accessibility, because there's lots of people out there who have hearing disabilities, and so you want them to be able to engage with your content. And the second piece is that it's just easy to also be able to give transcripts or captions in sound-off environments, like social or where, with video, where people might want to be reading in addition to listening. And all of these ways actually help you engage your users with your content. So stopping for a moment on audiograms, they're kind of like movie trailers, but they're made for podcasts and webinars and professional conversations. And they're great for sharing on social channels. So here's an example. So I was on this really great podcast, which was put on by this company called Rework, and we talked about women in AI. And it was about half an hour. And so afterwards, we took the recording, we put it through Snackable, and we extracted this really nice 26-second piece. So 30 minutes becomes 26 seconds. And so you can see some of the visuals around it, there is captions that run along with audio. There's a waveform underneath, so if you're scrolling through Twitter, you can see that something is happening, it's just not just an image. And so, yeah, and then we put it to Twitter, and it delivered a great engagement. So what we're really looking to do is create this ultimate content marketing machine for the spoken internet era. And why we do it is really to enable marketers, creators, professionals to turn this digital content into marketing assets. And where it really helps is basically drives awareness, really drives content engagement, and ultimately drives sales. So it's really all revenue generating at the end of the day. And finally, just quickly about us. So we are a team of 17 people. We're both in New York and in Tallinn. Our team is pretty deeply experienced in this topic. We built companies like this before. My teammates have PhDs in machine learning. Our technology is completely proprietary, so we built it ourselves, and we got a patent on it. And we're really fortunate to count some of the world's largest media companies and enterprises as customers, so Slate, CNN, UiPath. And we're finding more and more marketing teams actually onboarding with Snackable and find value out of that. And we're venture-backed, really happy to have some of the top VCs, both from the Nordics as well as the US, to support us on our journey. So I invite you guys to check out Snackable. If you go to snackable.ai, you can test our product for free. For a couple of hours, you can put any webinar or podcast or anything that you like, and you can see kind of what you get out. So this is us, here to give you new tools to kind of meet the demands where people read less and they listen more. Thank you.
Hi, thanks, Marty. Yeah, we've got a few minutes. Why don't we? I mean, I was already like, this is amazing. I need to run every Comedy Estonia podcast through this, because we know with the different podcasts we have at Comedy Estonia, we know it's all about clips. We know people want to listen to clips, but we're too effing lazy to actually sit there and edit our podcast. Or we got to pay some guy. Right now we're paying a guy to cut it up. So it's going to cut it up for me, and it's going to show me different types of that. And how does it work between languages?
Today we're working primarily in English, but other languages are coming.
Estonian language?
Not yet, unfortunately.
Okay, all right. If we cut up Tussisööjad, it'd just be red for 2 hours or something. But okay, English is getting there. Like, what's the pricing model? How are you monetizing this?
Yeah, so we basically charge in a way per hour of content uploaded through our system. Okay. And for enterprises, we do it by license, by seat. That's the main model. Okay.
And I didn't quite get it. It's showing you the interesting clips, and then it's automatically transcribing sort of all in one go as well?
You get the transcription, you get the chapters, you get the clips, and then you get tools to actually package them into something you can share.
Right, really nice. Does anyone have any questions for Mari before we head up there? It's cool. Audio is, yeah, let's go down there.
What's been the biggest challenge launching this Snackable for you?
Yeah. Many challenges, new challenges every day. I think initially the technical challenge was a really big one, really trying to figure out, you have this different kind of content, what's really important. So we used a lot of input from different users to kind of help us decide that, there's a lot of difference how people think about what's juicy, what's interesting, what's important. If you had a room of editors, they probably would all have a different opinion. But it's sometimes kind of a great thing, because you tell a human, give me 10 minutes of really salient insights from it, and they'll be like, no, I found 20, but it's like they're all relevant, and I can't decide, and I've spent already 5 hours on this. And you tell the machine to do that, the machine goes, well, here it is. So it's really, it can work really well. But yeah, the technical challenge is one that took us kind of a couple of years to really crack open.
We'll go down here. Yeah, because actually, as I was saying, we have one guy that edits a lot of the podcasts, particularly Tussisööjad, and I've seen our editor, after listening to that podcast for like 7 hours on end, he's about to lose his mind. So I think that your tool would be very useful just to save the sanity of some editors. But so you have a question?
Yes. Hi, I'm Fish, and I'm working on a music streaming platform. So the problem is we will have this autumn 100,000 tunes in Estonian that are actually never heard of, probably. And the question was, can Snackable actually transcribe lyrics from tunes?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So music is a completely different animal. So not today. Well, actually, funny you should mention that because we have an algorithm which detects music and excludes it from the transcript. So we'll get to it one day.
I imagine there's the technical difficulty, and of course we're hearing music over the back, so we've got to isolate that. But also music, and let's say you take something like rap, our friend Chris, who was just up here, that's like analyzing poetry.
Yep.
With metaphors and similes and imagery, and that must be a incredibly new AI challenge.
It is. Machines tend to be more quadratic, yeah.
Okay, so we're
Which
better
can be
when we're
a good
doing
thing.
straight up and down stuff like that. All right. Anything else, Amari, before we finish up today?
I'll be around here for the rest of the day, so if anyone has questions, please find me and ask anything you want.
Good. All right. Thank you, Mari. You'll definitely be hearing from me. Don't worry. Please, one more round of applause for Mari Joller.
Thank you.
Thank you, man.